The climate emergency, hybrid working, rapid technological developments, social inequity. No single person can solve these complex challenges alone. Succeeding now and into the future requires leaders who can collaborate. But what does this mean? And what does real collaboration look like? What skills does it require? I invited Tim Raw, Impact's Global Head of Solutions and Practice, to discuss this with me. So, Tim, welcome to In Good Company. How are you today?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
So we're going to get into talking about collaboration in a minute. But before we do that, why don't you tell us about yourself in 60 seconds?
Yeah. And it's always a good question. We have to be short about these things. I think there's two things. The word adventure always sits in my world. So I tend to like to do new things, go to new places, take on different challenges. And I've done that in my career and outside work as well. So traveling around the world, working with many different clients in different industries. And I get excited about that. And I get excited about things that problems that we solve that I don't really know the answer to, or I'm not really sure how we're going to do it. And I think it's sort of over the years of thinking about this, there's a little bit of wisdom, and I think I'm trying to find my edge all the time.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to push myself all the time and sort of realise my potential.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to describe that is adventure. And so I guess I get myself into some big challenges and take on some big roles, and I think that's really energising for me.
Yeah. How long have you worked at Impact?
More than 30 years, I think,
it?
is the best phrase. Yeah.
Well,
last century was definitely in my remit in terms of the work.
Well, you're going to be bringing a wealth of experience to this episode today. So let's get into it. So we're going to be talking about collaboration.
Yeah.
Maybe let's start with, what do we mean when we talk about collaboration in this context?
Well, I think there's a couple of interesting things. When I looked or thought about that question, it was almost why collaboration. And I think the context changes so much. The world is changing so quickly. It gets used for different reasons, and the word itself, I think, has some sort of connotations or some views from some people. Is it a good word? Is it a positive thing? There's been times when people or organisations or countries have come together, and technically they've achieved something. People and teams and organisations achieve something when collaboration happens, and sometimes it's for good. Sometimes there's some challenges with it. So I think the word's quite interesting because it sets up a mindset for people.
Yeah.
So really collaboration is around this idea of, and I think it needs to happen early on in what's going on and what's happening and what are we collectively working towards. And I don't think we often have that conversation either within our own teams, across teams, or within organisations. And I think you'll see this come forward a lot more in people talking about ruthless prioritisation. What's the one thing we're all working towards? And this is where you'll hear people, and it's an output of collaboration, is alignment. What are we all? How are we sharing our resources? How are we thinking about who we need to involve? How do we get a broader perspective to obviously deal with a lot broader and more complicated challenges? And I think so. Collaboration now, I think, is more important now than it's ever been.
Why is that?
Because of the complexity. I think collaboration helps us deal with really complex, difficult problems. How do we think about climate change in terms of our supply chain or operations? How do we think about urbanisation and what our customers and clients want? How do we use technology to really help us be more effective in the work that we do? That's what I hear from clients. How do we build a community of people that don't connect day to day, moment to moment like we are? How do we do all of those things? Not one simple answer will happen.
No.
And not one person can solve that. So the ability for us to connect at a broad level and at the word used, network level, I think is really, really important now. And in fact, I don't think one person can solve all our biggest problems, whether it be in a team, whether it be in our function, or whether it be in a political context as well.
So to maybe help narrow this down a little bit further, Can you think of any sort of examples where collaboration worked really well that might give us a picture of what it is that you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a couple of examples. I think when there's an organisation we've worked for, and it's involved in construction of really major construction projects. You know, they produce the steel, they produce the concrete, they look at the architecture of it, and they build the buildings. You know, collaboration is needed across the line to put up big buildings. Yeah. You can't allow those three areas to work independently. They have to sit down and go, what is it that we're trying to achieve for the customer going forward? And sometimes that means that one of those parts of the organisation has to change or adapt how it's working to enable the others to be successful collectively. And there's a good example of a stadium being built, and it's being delivered on time, on budget. Those two words are really hard to achieve at the moment. And when I was talking to the project manager in this with this stadium, you know, the ability for getting everyone to understand the big picture and the actual purpose and meaning behind their work and how that contributes to the bigger cause, I think was a real distinctive element that they saw in the project. And you know, we're talking hundreds of millions, if not billions, for these projects. Yeah. And there's pressure economically around the world, and so we need to be able to be predictable and accurate in our work. Our ability to bring people together to work together effectively is absolutely critical in that. A computer program, a project management plan will help, but it won't do it for us.
Well, that leads me neatly onto my next question then. So looking at the role of collaboration in the leadership toolkit, what role does that have, first of all, and then we'll move into how we can kind of develop it in a minute.
Yeah. I'm not convinced that leaders can achieve very much without collaboration.
Right.
And I think if I think about the role of the leader is really to communicate and to connect sets of people so that they understand and get a sense of where their part is in the bigger picture, and also who they have to go to and who they have to interact with to solve some probably challenges as the situation changes. Many of the situations that people deal with are not flat. They're not consistent as the projects continue or the work continues. There are problems that come up, and one person and a more hierarchical approach won't necessarily help us achieve that. What will happen, I guess, is that the leader has to facilitate, if that's the right word, has to influence, has to guide, and has to build really strong relationships. And so the leader, without the answer, but with the ability to create the right conditions for people to connect, I think is at the heart of good leadership going forward. And so what does that mean? Well, you have to be believable. Yeah. People have to listen to you. You have to create, as a leader, space for people to explore and understand. You have to create environments where people go, oh, wait there, I'm not sure. Yeah. This is going to work out like we thought. Let's pause and think for a moment on this. So the degree of influence that the leader has to have is one of enabling people to communicate and connect and think more deeply about the bigger challenges, the more, if you can term it, strategic thinking. Yeah. And then to be in a world where they can experiment and they can try new things. Because we know that we can't just simply put a plan down and expect people to execute and implement on it. You know, I was listening to a conversation yesterday, and they talked about a conversation they had with a colleague, and in 2024, this colleague had 5 different line managers. No, that's not consistency. That's not something that is easy to deal with or to handle. So as leaders, how do we help people navigate those difficult moments? Yeah. It's a real human-centered, interactive, connective type of activity.
So how then, if people are watching or listening to this, they're kind of thinking, right, okay, well, how do I start to develop some of those skills in order to collaborate more effectively?
Yeah.
What would be your advice?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think, maybe it's the adventure in me that comes out. But how willing are you to explore the boundaries?
Yeah.
Of where you're working? When do you walk across a boundary and want to have a conversation with someone in a different function maybe, or different part of the organization, or maybe even a different client group, or even different clients or customers? When do you sit down with them to learn what their world is like? As opposed to sit down with them and go, can you come to me and help me solve this problem? But really have that open-minded approach, that curiosity or curiousness, if that's the right word, to go, I need to understand different people's worlds, because that then starts to give me a bigger picture on how the whole system is working and connecting and relating together. That helps you make decisions. That helps you understand who you need to talk to when things are not moving as you would want them to move.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of sort of phrases that are really useful. If you keep coming back to the same problems, if you keep sitting here going, this problem, we've been dealing with this for a long time.
Yeah.
You're not looking further enough.
Yeah.
You're not looking for a more diverse perspective. You're not looking at the complexities of how things are working or happening. And so you've got to have that real sort of deep dive and passion to understand other people, understand their world, but also build really strong relationships. I want to talk to Tim. Actually, wouldn't it be useful to draw Tim in and have a conversation with him, not about his own specific area, but about a problem that you're having? So we start to think about the opportunities and the challenges that may emerge, as opposed to trying to fix what's happening now. So I think that sort of influencing is working across networks and boundaries, and then your relationships and how do you build them really, really quickly. And, if you listen to someone and you show that you listen to them really well, I think that is the most significant thing that you can do to build a relationship. Nothing more or less than that. Give people visibility.
Yeah, I like what you were saying, and I think it's right about the curiosity piece, but also not just asking the questions, but really listening to the answers or the feedback that might be coming to you from those conversations. So those conversation skills are really important. So if you were to offer one last piece of like top tip, like in order to as you sort of your next step to improve your collaboration skills, what would your number one top tip be?
So as you think about embarking on a new initiative or a new project, and it's not necessarily business as usual work, there's two levels here. If we take it from that new initiative or project, I think really early on, as early as possible, you bring in as many people as possible to start getting their perspectives on what you're trying to achieve and how that impacts in the bigger part of either the organisation or the project itself. I think we're too late on bringing people in. And so people feel like they're coming in to contribute their little bit and they move off. And actually, it's the ability for sets of people to build really strong relationships through the entirety of the connection or the project that gives that real richness. And it also, I think the other side of it is, we not always, but we tend to work with people more than once. And so rather than being transactional and thinking, well, I just need them for this activity and then I can move on to something different, think of it of who is my network and sets of people that when the opportunity arises, I can bring them in to help support some of the thinking and the mindsets that I have.
And for clarity, are you talking about getting perspectives, or are you talking about doing some of the doing? Because is there a risk of too many cooks, for example? That's probably quite a cultural phrase, I think. But yeah, is there a risk of overcrowding a project with different perspectives?
I think you're right. You've got to get the right people in the room. But when I say early on, that's around setting goals. That's around setting your approach. That's around setting the culture. Then you have to, with that in mind, you then tend to know the right people with the right roles who need to come in.
Yeah.
So when I say early on, in its genesis, who do we need to talk to be able, we talk a lot about stakeholders now. We talk about it all the time, but actually these are the people who are going to be working and operating with the stakeholders as well. And I think when problems are really simple, I think you can keep the group relatively small to start with, and you can execute relatively quickly. Yeah. But I'm talking about really complex problems, building stadiums or changing the way that an organisation interacts with its customers, or engaging or bringing in new technology, which means that you operate differently with your customers. We need to have multiple perspectives to come in early on to be able to keep sharing your thoughts and balancing your approach as you go forward. So it tends to be a much more dynamic, a dynamic way of working. And yes, you need to have the structures and the process and the plans, but those alone won't necessarily get you there, because you're tending to have to sort out things as you go along, because it isn't predictable. Very little is predictable at this point.
Tim, that's been amazing. I'd love to ask you loads more questions, but we are running out of time, sadly. So we do have one, which is a bit more of a personal question. And we like to ask this at the end of each of our episodes to all of our guests. So that is if you were to look back at your career and you were talking to your younger self and giving some advice, what would that advice to your younger self be?
I think the two things that immediately jump into my mind, firstly, I think is pause more.
Right.
I think we get excited, or I get excited and passionate and sort of walk towards big challenges. And I think at times being a little more considered, I think is very useful. And so if you take that to the next level and go, well, why would you want to pause more? Why would that be? Why would you give yourself that advice? I think at the heart of it is really spending more time on really understanding myself. And, that's not all the good things that I've necessarily done. But where are those moments that I find difficult? Where are those moments where I'm probably more hesitant? And actually honouring those, and then sort of being able to be comfortable with those areas of yourself that probably need a little bit of work on, and being able to be more open about talking about those as well, and being able to share that with a set of people who are going to sort of honour your integrity, but yet have that real sort of commitment to you as a person and developing your skills and capability, realising that we're all not perfect. And so I think that if I could have possibly had the capability or capacity to do that more, I think that would have come out in perhaps having stronger mentoring relationships, and perhaps myself asking more questions to other people about how I come across.
Feedback,
and through feedback, not just holding on the stuff that was useful and made me effective, but some of the stuff that perhaps was a little more difficult to acknowledge or understand. I think those are the. And
normally what I like to do is sort of throw that back and kind of go, that's advice you would give your younger self. Are you still living by that advice?
I think that's where it came from. I think I really work a lot harder on that, listening and pausing and sort of being more comfortable with me as a person, and for me to be effective, I need to understand my imperfections, if that's the way of describing it, and enjoy that, because it creates me, doesn't it? And that's what's more engaging for people, and I think people find it more relatable. And I enjoy it. I enjoy that challenge as the true adventurer that I probably am.
What's your next adventure?
I've got plenty. I've got plenty on at the moment. We've got some good client work coming forward. And then out of work, I spend a lot of time in the mountains. So I've got a few big objectives skiing in the mountains. So
sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of In Good Company. If you would like to find out any more about Impact or the work we do, or perhaps you'd like to explore our leadership playbook, then you'll find all of the links that you need in the description of where you found today's episode. So thank you very much for tuning in, and until the next time, take care.